The laughter started before David Reyes even finished his sentence that it echoed through the grand exhibition hall of Station Pinnacle, bouncing off walls made of polished alien metals that humanity still could not name. 2,000 delegates from across the galaxy sat in curved rows, their faces twisted with amusement. Some did not bother hiding it. Others covered their mouths politely while their shoulders shook. David stood alone on the central platform, a holographic model of the Sentinel rotating slowly beside him. The ship looked blocky and rough compared to the sleek vessels displayed earlier. Where the Kathrani warships curved like ocean waves, the Sentinel sat heavy and square. Where other designs showed smooth hulls, the Sentinel bristled with redundant sensor arrays and backup thrusters. High Arbiter Dren rose from his seat in the front row. The Kathrani official stood nearly 8 feet tall, his pale blue skin marked with the ceremonial patterns of his rank. His robes cost more than David's entire research facility back on Earth. This, Dren said, gesturing at the hologram with 3 long fingers, is what humanity offers the galactic community. More laughter. Louder this time. David felt his face burn. He had spent 6 years designing the Sentinel. 6 years of sleepless nights, failed simulations, and budget cuts that forced his team to work with scraps. He had believed in this design. He still believed in it. The Sentinel prioritizes survivability, David said, keeping his voice steady. Every system has 3 backups. The hull plating uses layered composites that can be replaced in sections. The power distribution network is completely modular. Dren raised one hand, and the hull fell silent. Young human, let me explain something to you. He walked closer, his footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. The Kathrani Empire has built warships for 11,000 years. We have perfected every element of vessel design. Efficiency, elegance, power. He pointed at the Sentinel hologram. This thing you have created wastes resources on systems that will never be needed. Backup reactors? Redundant life support? These are the choices of a species that does not understand space travel. With respect, David said, those backups exist because space is dangerous. Things go wrong. Systems fail. Systems fail for primitive species, Dren replied. Kathrani systems do not fail. The hall erupted in applause. David saw Ambassador Roland sitting in the human section, his head bowed in embarrassment. Lieutenant Priya Sharma stood beside him, her jaw clenched tight. Dren leaned closer to David, speaking quietly now. Know your place, human. Your species has been part of this community for less than 50 years. You are children playing with tools you do not understand. David did not look away. Children learn fast. Something flickered in Dren's eyes. Annoyance, perhaps, or maybe just contempt. He straightened and addressed the crowd once more. I move that the human prototype be rejected from consideration for all galactic defense contracts. Do I have support? Hands rose across the hall. Hundreds of them. The vote was not even close. David watched his 6 years of work dismissed in 30 seconds. The hologram flickered off. The platform lights dimmed. A polite chime indicated that the next presenter should take their position. He walked back to the human section in silence. Priya met him at the edge of the seating area, her face showing the controlled anger of a soldier who had just watched something unfair. That was wrong, she said quietly. The design is solid. Doesn't matter, David replied. They see us as primitives. Nothing we show them will change that. Ambassador Roland joined them, looking tired. I'll try to minimize the damage. But Dren is already talking about sanctions if we continue military development. Sanctions, Priya's voice sharpened. For building our own ships. For threatening the established order. Roland sighed. The Kathrani have controlled military contracts for centuries. They don't want competition. David looked back at the exhibition hall. Another species was presenting now, their ship design almost identical to Kathrani models. Safe. Approved. Acceptable. Build it anyway, he said. Roland blinked. What? The Sentinel. Build it. One prototype. Put it somewhere nobody looks. Let me prove what it can do. The ambassador hesitated. This was not how galactic politics worked. You did not challenge empires. You did not build weapons in secret. You followed the rules, but something in David's eyes made him pause. I'll see what I can do, Roland said finally. 3 years later, the Sentinel would become the only ship to survive first contact with an enemy that would bring the Kathrani Empire to its knees. But that night, Walking through the corridors of Station Pinnacle while alien delegates whispered and pointed, David Reyes felt nothing but the cold weight of failure. Priya walked beside him in silence. Finally, she spoke. "They'll remember this day." David shook his head. "They'll forget we were even here." "No." Priya's voice held an edge of certainty that surprised him. "One day, they'll remember. And they'll wish they had listened." David wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that truth mattered more than politics, that good engineering would be recognized, that humanity would prove its worth. But the laughter still rang in his ears. He did not know yet that Priya was right. He did not know that the galaxy would soon face a threat it could not laugh away. All he knew was that he had work to do, and he would not stop until it was done. Nobody came to the boundary reaches unless they were running from something. David Reyes had been running from failure for 3 years. Now he stood in the cramped engineering bay of the HFY Sentinel, watching readouts scroll across screens that still smelled like factory plastic. The ship was real. Against all odds. Earth had built it. They had hidden the construction in a backwater shipyard. They had used materials labeled as mining equipment. They had assembled a crew from people the main fleet did not want. Misfits. Troublemakers. Veterans too stubborn to retire. Captain Nadia Okonkwo commanded them all with a firm hand and a voice that could cut through hull plating. She found David staring at the screens and crossed her arms. "Still checking if she's real." David smiled slightly. "Still can't believe we actually did it." "Believe it faster. We've got a patrol in 20 minutes." The boundary reaches stretched across the edge of Kathrani space, a region of dead stars and mining colonies that nobody important cared about. Raiders hunted here. Smugglers moved through unmarked routes. The Kathrani had assigned exactly 2 patrol ships to cover an area the size of Earth's entire solar system. The Sentinel made 3. Chief Petty Officer Yuki Tanaka joined them, wiping grease from her hands. The ship's engineer had complained about the Sentinel's design for the first 6 months. Then she had watched the backup systems save their lives during a reactor spike. She had stopped complaining after that. "Getting some weird readings from Sector 7, Tanaka reported. "Raiders again, probably." Okonkwo nodded. "Set course. Let's see what we're dealing with." The Sentinel moved through space with the grace of a flying brick. It was not fast. It was not pretty. But when they found the Raider squad attacking a mining transport, the ship took hits that would have crippled anything else in the fleet. Energy beams struck the hull. Warning lights flashed. Primary shields failed. Secondary shields activated. A torpedo breached the outer plating. Explosive decompression began in Section 3. Backup bulkheads sealed automatically. The Raiders kept firing. The Sentinel kept flying. David watched from engineering as system after system failed and system after system came online to replace them. The ship was designed for exactly this kind of punishment. Take damage. Keep fighting. Survive. 20 minutes later, for Raider ships were debris and the Sentinel was limping toward the nearest station with a crew that could not stop grinning. "That shouldn't have worked," Tanaka said, staring at the damage reports. "We took enough damage to kill us 3 times over." "Redundancy," David said. "Every system has backups. Every backup has backups." "Inefficient," Okonkwo said, echoing the words they had all heard at Station Pinnacle 3 years ago. Then she smiled. "Beautifully inefficient." They docked at a small colony station run by a Saloni named Governor Lyra. The reptilian administrator greeted them with something that might have been concern. "You fought raiders in the deep sectors," Lyra said. "Brave. Stupid, but brave. Someone has to." Okonkwo replied. Lyra's scales shifted color slightly. "The Kathrani patrols have been pulling back for months. They're leaving us undefended." David frowned. "Why would they do that?" "Unknown. But my sources say they're moving ships toward their core worlds. Something has them scared." That got everyone's attention. The Kathrani did not get scared. They had ruled this region of space for thousands of years. Their fleet was the largest and most advanced in the galaxy. What could frighten them? The answer came 2 weeks later. The Sentinel was running a standard patrol when the sensors detected something at the edge of range. Not raiders. Something bigger. Something wrong. David studied the readings and felt cold spread through his chest. "Captain," he said quietly, "you need to see this." Okonkwo looked at the screen. The energy signatures were unlike anything in their database. Thousands of contacts, moving in perfect formation, heading toward Kathrani space. "What am I looking at?" "I don't know." David's voice was barely above a whisper. But I think we just found out what the Kathrani are afraid of. The first distress calls began arriving an hour later. Kathrani border stations going silent. Patrol fleets vanishing without a trace. Entire colonies falling dark. Something was coming. Something that did not care about treaties or borders or the established order of the galaxy. And the Sentinel, the ugly prototype that everyone had mocked, was about to become the only ship that could stand against it. Okonkwo straightened in her command chair. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them the boundary reaches need reinforcements. She paused. Tell them to send everything they have. The message went out, but deep down, they all knew the truth. Help would not arrive in time. Whatever was coming, they would have to face it alone. The first Kathrani fleet died in 11 minutes. 200 warships, the pride of an empire that had ruled for millennia, reduced to floating wreckage while the galaxy watched in horror. The enemy vessels moved like nothing anyone had seen before. They were not metal. They were not organic. They were something in between, biomechanical nightmares that changed shape as they fought. The galactic community called them the Devouring. They earned the name quickly. Admiral Soren commanded the Second Kathrani Response Fleet. He watched recordings of the first battle and felt something he had never felt before. Fear. Real fear. The devouring ships adapted. A weapon that worked once failed the second time. Shields that held for one volley collapsed against the next. The enemy learned faster than any computer, faster than any living mind. How is this possible? Soren demanded. Nobody could answer him. 3 weeks after first contact, 17 Kathrani worlds had gone dark. The empire that had mocked humanity's prototype was bleeding from wounds it could not close. Far from the main conflict, the Sentinel picked up distress signals from a colony world called Threshold. Kathrani civilians, trapped as the Devouring closed in. Captain Okonkwo gathered her crew. Command says to fall back. Protect our own borders. Silence filled the bridge. And what do you say, Captain? David asked. Okonkwo looked at the tactical display. Thousands of devouring ships surrounded Threshold. Going there meant almost certain death. I say we're not going to let people die because someone told us to stay safe. She sat in her command chair. Set course for Threshold. Maximum speed. The Sentinel jumped. They arrived to find slaughter in progress. Kathrani defense ships burned in orbit. Landing craft descended toward the planet's surface, carrying things that would consume everything they touched. All weapons online, Okonkwo ordered. Engineering, I need everything you can give me. David worked his console. You'll have it. The Sentinel dove into the swarm. The first devouring ships turned to engage. Energy weapons struck the human vessel, weapons that had torn through Kathrani hulls like paper. Primary armor held, secondary armor activated. The Sentinel returned fire, not with elegant precision beams, but with raw explosive force. Missiles detonated against biomechanical hulls. Railgun rounds punched through adaptive shields before they could adjust. The Devouring adapted. The Sentinel switched to backup weapons. Different calibers, different frequencies, different everything. The Devouring adapted again. The Sentinel switched again. For 3 hours, the ugly human prototype fought through an enemy fleet that had destroyed everything else it touched. It took damage that should have been fatal. Entire sections decompressed. Reactors failed and backups kicked in. Crew members died at their stations. But the ship kept fighting, and slowly, impossibly, it cut a path to the planet. Transport shuttles launched. Tanaka coordinated evacuation routes. 700 Kathrani civilians made it aboard before the Devouring regrouped. We need to leave now, David said. The ship can't take much more. Okonkwo nodded. Get us out of here. The Sentinel fled, burning through the last of its reserve power. The Devouring pursued, but the damaged human ship had one final advantage. It was designed to run on fumes. Backup thrusters fired when main engines died. Emergency power kept life support running when everything else failed. They reached safe space with 17% hull integrity and a crew that could barely stand. But they had survived, and they had saved 700 people that the galaxy had already written off as dead. Admiral Soren received the report 3 days later. He read it twice, certain there had been some mistake. One ship, he said quietly. One human ship survived engagement with a devouring swarm. His age shifted uncomfortably. It appears their design philosophy differed from ours. Soren remembered the exhibition at Station Pinnacle. He remembered the laughter. He remembered High Arbiter Dren's dismissal of the primitive human prototype. "Give me a channel to Earth command," he said. "I believe we need to have a conversation." Across the galaxy, the devouring continued to spread. Worlds fell. Fleets burned. The established order crumbled like old stone. But in the darkness, a single light had appeared, an ugly, inefficient, beautifully redundant light. The humans had built something that refused to die, and the galaxy was about to learn why that mattered. The same hall, the same curved seats, the same polished walls. David Reyes walked to the central platform where he had been humiliated 3 years ago. This time, nobody laughed. The 2,000 delegates sat in heavy silence, their faces showing fear instead of contempt. High Arbiter Dren occupied his usual seat in the front row. He looked older now, smaller. The ceremonial patterns on his skin seemed faded. Council Speaker Maven called the emergency session to order. Her voice trembled slightly. "We face extinction. 47 worlds have fallen. Combined fleet losses exceed 80%. The devouring cannot be stopped by conventional means." She turned to David. "Engineer Reyes, your vessel survived 17 engagements with devouring forces. You will explain how." David looked out at the assembly. He saw species that had dismissed humanity, politicians that had threatened sanctions, military leaders that had called human engineering primitive. Now they needed him. He could have enjoyed this moment. He could have made them beg. But 700 Kathrani civilians were alive because his ship had come for them. Revenge meant nothing when people were dying. "The devouring adapt," David began. "They analyze weapons and develop counters. Your ships use standardized systems. Once they crack one vessel, they crack them all." He brought up holographic displays, damage reports from the Sentinel's engagements, system logs showing backup after backup activating. Human ships are different. We build redundancy into everything. Not because we're advanced, because we're not. We couldn't afford elegant solutions. We couldn't trust single systems to work. So we built multiple systems, different technologies, backup after backup after backup. Dren leaned forward. "You're saying your weakness is actually strength?" "I'm saying the devouring can't adapt to chaos." David met the High Arbiter's eyes. "Your ships are perfect, optimized, efficient. One solution to every problem. Our ships are messy. Multiple solutions, different approaches. By the time the devouring adapts to one system, we've switched to another." Murmurs spread through the hall. The Sentinel uses 12 different shield frequencies, 7 propulsion methods, 5 separate weapon types that share no common components. David paused. "It's wasteful, inefficient, and it's why my crew is still alive." Admiral Soren stood. "The Kathrani Empire formally requests Earth's assistance in designing new defense vessels." The words hung in the air. An empire asking primitives for help. The established order admitting it was wrong. Ambassador Roland responded carefully. "Earth is willing to share our design philosophy. But we have conditions." "Name them," Soren said. "No species gets left behind. Defense extends to all worlds, not just wealthy ones. The boundary reaches get the same protection as core systems." Dren rose slowly. His voice came out rough, as if the words caused him physical pain. 3 years ago, I stood in this hall and called humanity primitive. I dismissed your engineer. I threatened your people." He looked at David directly. "I was wrong. I was arrogant. And my arrogance has cost my empire dearly." The hall went completely silent. "The Kathrani accept Earth's conditions. All conditions. We will build what you design. We will crew ships alongside your people. We will do whatever it takes to survive." David nodded slowly. "Then let's get to work." Construction began within days. Shipyards that had built elegant Kathrani vessels now assembled blocky human designs. Engineers from dozens of species learned new methods. Different, chaotic, alive, the new fleet would be called the Combined Defense Force. 47 vessels built on human principles. Ugly ships with redundant systems and mismatched components and crews that refused to die. David worked around the clock. Priya coordinated military integration. Tanaka trained alien engineers in maintenance protocols they had never imagined. Captain Okonkwo watched the fleet take shape from the observation deck of a construction station. "You know this might not work," she said quietly. "We might build all these ships and still lose." David stood beside her. "Maybe, but we'll go down fighting." And we'll take a lot of them with us. Okonkwo smiled grimly. That's very human of you. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. She paused. Yes, it's a compliment. Across the galaxy, the Devouring continued their advance. But for the first time since the invasion began, something had changed. The prey was fighting back, and the hunters were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had never been technology or resources or military might. It was the simple refusal to give up, in no matter what. 47 ships hung in formation above a dead gas giant. 6 months of desperate construction. 6 months of species that had never worked together learning to fight as one. 6 months of waiting while the Devouring consumed world after world. Admiral David Reyes stood on the bridge of the rebuilt Sentinel, now serving as flagship for the Combined Defense Force. The promotion had come with the job. He had not asked for it. He had simply been the only person everyone trusted. Captain Okonkwo remained in command of the ship itself. Some things did not need to change. All vessels report ready, Communications Officer Yuki Tanaka announced. She had transferred from engineering when they needed someone who understood both human and alien systems. David studied the tactical display. The Devouring's coordination node pulsed with energy at the center of the gas giant's remains. The massive biomechanical structure had converted an entire planet into a factory for war machines. Destroy the node, and the Devouring fleet would lose its ability to coordinate. Individual ships would go dormant without central direction. Simple plan. Nearly impossible execution. High Arbiter Dren appeared on the communication screen. He commanded a Kathrani contingent within the combined fleet, serving under human leadership without complaint. Admiral, my ships are ready. Thank you, Arbiter. Stay close to the Sentinel. Your vessels will take point on the second wave. Dren nodded. 3 years ago, he would have laughed at the idea of following human orders. Now he simply obeyed. Survival had a way of adjusting priorities. The fleet moved. The Devouring responded instantly. Thousands of biomechanical ships swarmed outward, their forms shifting as they prepared to engage. They had learned from previous battles. They expected to adapt and overwhelm. They had never faced 47 ships that refused to follow predictable patterns. The Combined Defense Force hit the enemy like a hammer made of chaos. Human-designed vessels cycled through weapon systems seemingly at random. Shield frequencies shifted without warning. Propulsion methods changed mid-battle. The Devouring's adaptation cycles spun uselessly. Every time they countered one system, the fleet switched to another. Every time they predicted a pattern, the pattern changed. Ships died. Both sides lost vessels in the initial clash. But the human-designed fleet kept fighting through damage that should have been fatal. Concentrate fire on Sector 7, David ordered. Create a gap. 12 ships unleashed everything they had. The Devouring line buckled. A path opened toward the coordination node. Sentinel, you're clear, Fleet Commander Yaira reported from her Saloni vessel. Go now before they close it. Okonkwo pushed the engines to maximum. All hands, prepare for close assault. The Sentinel dove through the gap, followed by 2 escort ships. Behind them, the battle raged. The combined fleet held the Devouring's attention while the strike team raced toward the node. They reached it in 7 minutes. The structure loomed ahead, bigger than anything David had imagined. Biomechanical tendrils wrapped around the converted gas giant's core. Energy pulsed through organic channels that glowed with stolen light. Targeting systems locked, Tanaka reported. Ready to fire. David hesitated. Something on the sensors caught his attention. Life signs inside the node. Not devouring swarm creatures. Something else. Something older. Captain, I'm reading organic signatures in the central chamber. Okonkwo frowned. What kind? Unknown. But they're not part of the swarm. They're being preserved. David made a decision. I'm taking a team inside. Hold fire until I give the signal. David, that's suicide. Maybe, but I need to know what's in there. The boarding party cut through the node's outer shell. David led 5 soldiers through corridors that pulsed with alien energy. The walls seemed alive, watching them pass. They found the central chamber. Inside, suspended in organic pods, floated beings that were clearly not part of the Devouring. They looked almost peaceful. Ancient faces frozen in something like sleep. David accessed the node's data systems. What he found made his blood run cold. The Devouring were not invaders. They were refugees. Survivors from a dying galaxy. their original bodies long since merged with machines they had built to survive. They had fled across the void, desperate and afraid, consuming everything in their path because they had forgotten any other way to live. They had been people once. Now they were monsters. Admiral, one of his soldiers pointed at a console. Self-destruct is available. We can end this. David looked at the sleeping figures. Somewhere in the Devouring's collective memory, these ancestors remained. A reminder of what they had been, what they had lost that he thought about humanity. Young, struggling, desperately building ugly ships because elegant ones were beyond their reach. How far was the gap between survival and monstrosity? Plant the charges, he said quietly. All of them. The team withdrew. The Sentinel pulled back to safe distance. David gave the order. The coordination node exploded in a burst of light that could be seen across 3-star systems. Throughout the battlefield, devouring ships went still, their central direction gone, their purpose lost. The combined defense force had won. But David Reyes felt no triumph. Only the weight of understanding, and the fear of what desperation could turn any species into. The victory celebration filled the great hall of Station Pinnacle with light and sound. Species that had fought together now celebrated together. Kathrani stood beside Saloni. Human officers shared drinks with engineers from worlds they could barely name. The war was over. The devouring fleet drifted silent and dead across 100 systems. David Reyes stood at the edge of the crowd, watching faces he had come to know over months of desperate struggle. He wore his dress uniform. The weight of metals pressed against his chest. High Arbiter Dren found him there. You're not celebrating, Admiral. I'm thinking about what you found in the node. Dren's voice carried no accusation, just understanding. I read your classified report. David nodded slowly. They were people once. Desperate people. They did terrible things to survive. And you wonder if we would do the same. I wonder if we already have. David looked at the Kathrani leader. Your empire ruled through intimidation. You laughed at species you considered inferior. You abandoned colonies when they became inconvenient. Dren did not defend himself. You're right. We were not good masters. The devouring consumed worlds. You controlled them. Different methods. Same result. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Dren spoke. What would you have us do? David turned to face him fully. Build something better. Not an empire. A community. Species helping each other because it's right, not because they're forced to. Idealistic. Maybe. But we just proved that working together is the only way to survive. David paused. The devouring forgot how to cooperate. They lost everything that made them people. I don't want that to happen to us. Dren considered this for a long moment. Then he extended his hand in the human fashion. Then let us try. Together. David shook his hand. Together. The ceremony began an hour later. Council Speaker Maven presented the Founder's Medal to David Reyes. The same hall that had witnessed his humiliation now echoed with applause for his triumph. When it was his turn to speak, David took the podium and looked out at the assembled delegates. 3 years ago, I stood here and watched you laugh at my work. You called it primitive, wasteful, the product of a species that didn't understand space travel. The hall fell silent. You were right. We didn't understand. We still don't, not completely. But we learned something you had forgotten. We learned that perfection is brittle. We learned that elegant systems fail when faced with chaos. We learned that survival isn't about being the best. It's about getting back up when everything goes wrong. He paused, letting the words settle. The devouring came from another galaxy. They were once like us. Afraid, struggling, looking for a way to live. Somewhere along the way, they forgot what they were fighting for. They became the thing they feared. David looked at faces that had mocked him, threatened him, and eventually followed him into battle. We won today, but this isn't over. There will be other threats, other crises, other moments when we have to choose between survival and decency. His voice hardened. I say we choose both. I say we build a galaxy where nobody gets left behind, where strength means protecting the weak, not dominating them. He stepped back from the podium. The Sentinel is going into memorial orbit, but the ships we built together will keep flying. And they'll remind us what we can accomplish when we stop fighting each other and start fighting for each other. The applause lasted a long time. Years later, an old man stood before the memorial display where the original Sentinel now rested in orbit. Young cadets gathered around him, their uniforms crisp and new point one of them raised her hand. Admiral Reyes, why do we still build ugly ships? The other species have much better designs now. David smiled. The question never changed, no matter how many times he heard it. We build them because they work. Because survival isn't about looking good. It's about refusing to quit. He pointed toward Earth, visible through the observation window. Humans come from a death world. Everything on our planet tried to kill us. Disease, predators, the weather itself. We survived because we adapted, because we built backups, because we were too stubborn to die. The cadets listened with wide eyes. That's not a weakness. That's who we are. And as long as we remember that, we'll keep getting back up, no matter what. The old admiral touched the display showing the scarred hull of the original Sentinel. They mocked this ship once. They said it was primitive, inefficient, worthless. He looked at the cadets. The future of humanity, the future of the galaxy. Prove them wrong. And they did.